Hello. I'm James, and I live in Manchester in the UK. And you're listening to English with a Brew, a podcast where I talk about different day-to-day topics to help you learn English the most natural way possible. And that is only by listening to it. If you want to support this podcast, read transcripts, and get exclusive access to more content, go to patreon.com/English with a Brew. So, as we say in Manchester, get a brew on and let's get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello, how are you today? I hope you're well. Today is Monday the 2nd of September, so it's the start of a new week and also the start of a new month. And on top of that, it's the start of a new school year because this week the kids go back to school. The school summer holidays have finished here in the UK, and that is the topic of today's episode. I'm going to talk about school here in the UK. School here is free. You don't need to pay to go to school. And the majority of kids in the UK go to public schools. However, there are private schools too. They exist. But they can be very expensive. Only 5.9% of children, so almost 6%, go to private school here. At different ages, you go to different schools. The first school you go to is called primary school, and usually children start primary school at 4 or 5 years old. This is where you start to learn to read, to write, and to do basic maths, and maybe make your first school friends. After primary school, you go to secondary school when you're about 11 years old. Secondary schools are usually, but not always, bigger, with more students and more facilities. For example, my secondary school had approximately 1,400 students, but my primary school only had about 300. Sometimes you can decide between 2 or 3 schools, secondary schools, that you could go to. But this depends a lot on where you live. In bigger towns and cities, for example, there are more schools with more students, but sometimes in the countryside, there may only be one secondary school between 2 or 3 villages, and you need to get the bus to school. In secondary school, you continue studying core subjects like maths, English, and science. These subjects are compulsory. You have to study them. You don't get a choice. But you do also have the opportunity to choose your other subjects. And I chose to study physical education, or PE, media studies, and German. But I could have studied, for example, art, history, geography, or music, or lots of other subjects. And at the end of secondary school, you sit exams to test your knowledge. And then, with your exam results, you have 3 choices. You can leave school and maybe get a job, or you can continue to study in 6th form, which is quite similar to school, and that's what I did when I finished secondary school. Or you can continue to study in a college, which is similar to school, but there are more opportunities to do courses in more practical skills or jobs and get qualifications for specific jobs. Now that's a very short and very simple summary of the school system in the UK. Some parts of the UK use different names to describe different schools, or the age that you start school could be different. But this was my experience of school in the UK. But what do you need to go to school? What things or equipment do you need to go back to school in September? Well, in primary and secondary school, you typically need a uniform. And a uniform is the outfit that all of the students wear, so they look the same. And you will need some type of school bag, maybe a backpack, to carry all of your things. And in that school bag, you might have a pencil case, which has all of your stationery to write and draw with inside, like pens, pencils, rulers, and erasers. You probably also have school books for your lessons, and maybe a notepad to take notes in. If you study maths or some types of sciences like chemistry or physics, maybe you also have a calculator. I certainly know that I needed one. And that's about it, I think. School is a big part of life here in the UK and outside of the UK for everyone. It's where you make your first friends, you learn what things you enjoy, and start to develop your own identity and personality. But now that you know me a little, if you listen to this podcast a lot, can you guess what my favourite subject was in school? I think it's probably a little obvious, but it was English. I loved reading and writing stories when I was young, and later in secondary school, I loved learning about the history of the language and how it evolved and changed over time. Anyway, we have reached the end of this episode, and so my question for you today is, what was, or what is, if you're still in school, your favourite subject at school? I'd love to know, so let me know in the comments or send me a voice message on Spotify. See you later. That's everything for today's episode of English with a Brew. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments if you did or if you didn't, and tell me what topics you'd like to hear me talk about in future episodes. And don't forget, if you want to support this podcast and get access to all of the exclusive episodes, you can do that on my Patreon page. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, morning, afternoon, or evening, whatever time it is where you are right now. Take care.